Hey guys, and welcome back to another session of the Lumix Lounge. We're here in wonderful Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm talking with a photographer here who has done a genre of photography and is doing a genre of photography that we haven't talked about on the show much, and that's volume photography. So Dave, let's see, I want to know the name of your company. So Dave Spark is the name, right?
It's Dave Stock, S-T-O-C-K, like the market.
S-T-O-C-K, and what's your URL?
We have Dave Stock Photography, and a division of Dave Stock Photography is our volume division, Team DSP, T-E-A-M-D-S-P.
Team DSP, and
yes.
You guys we're going to dive into lots of aspects and tangents in terms of the volume photography business, but just to foreshadow things, you are one of the most successful businesses in the country, that is doing this kind of photography. So I want to talk about how you got there from where you are or where you were, and but let's start with just a little bit of history.
Okay.
So photography, what was your path into becoming where you are today, the volume sports photographer?
I started off, I got the photography bug as a 13-year-old and started working professionally almost from the beginning as a stringer, doing magazine and newspaper work, predominantly shooting high school sports. By the time I was a junior in high school, I was doing pictures for Runner's World magazine. I was a distance runner, so my credential as an athlete would get me in the infield at big meets, and then I'd whip out the camera, and before they could kick me off, I'd get some pictures.
Yeah.
I went to college, studied photography at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and when I graduated with a degree in photojournalism, I had a job waiting for me at Runner's World magazine and 6 other magazines. I was the director of photography and the chief photographer and the photo slave all the way down to the bottom.
Yeah.
And I did that for a short time, and then I left there to freelance for Sports Illustrated and other magazines, basically doing professional football and quite a bit of baseball.
Yeah.
Did a lot of card photography for companies like Score and Upper Deck and Topps, and most of them now defunct. And after doing that for a while, in '85, started doing commercial photography. So I was shooting for hospitals, I was doing annual reports, Architectural Digest type shoots,
wow.
Things with a bunch of lights. Because when I was with Sports Illustrated, Peter Reed Miller, among others, taught me that you need to have 3 and 4 and 5 lights, and you need to understand them to really make things look the way you want them to look, even when we're doing feature shoots for magazines.
Yeah.
So that was my vision when I started doing volume sports in basically 1999. It happened by accident. I was coaching high school cross country as a volunteer in Texas, and the head coach said, "Can you take a group picture?" I said, "Well, I've done the Pro Bowl team. I guess I could handle your cross country team." And next thing I knew, this became my sole focus, was doing the volume sports, but trying to do it from a high end, from someone who had really studied and made a life's work of trying to do this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then try to not so much dumb it down, but to adapt it to a volume workflow so we could capture the type of quality you wanted to, but do it every 15 seconds.
That's
and,
the key.
Yeah, and give each kid the feeling that we cared about them and we love them for 7 to 8 of those 15 seconds.
Yeah.
And then send them out the door. So that was a heck of a challenge, and a far greater challenge than I ever anticipated. If I knew it was going to be like, I don't know if I would have the courage to take the path, but now I can look back and say I'm glad I did.
See, that's great. So there's a couple things I want to hit on there. So the first thing is amazing career, right? And clearly you know your way around a camera and imaging and content creation. Stepping away from the volume photography conversation a little bit and looking at the photography industry as a whole, specifically sports photography. So you're a sports volume shooter, so it's, we're talking about what volume shooting is in a second, but looking at, like say Sports Illustrated, getting rid of their full-time photography staff and going contract with all those guys. Last year, it was the Chicago Sun-Times canned their photography department. There's changes all over the place. The point of the question is, where is this stuff going in terms of the career field of photography? Is it all pointing towards, the volume type sport or photography? Is it training? Or the photojournalists that we used to know and love? Is that a dying dinosaur breed? What do you think?
That was 4 questions.
It all rolled into one.
You're good at asking questions.
It was a salad of questions.
I should find something in there I have an answer for.
Yeah.
It's really sad
Yeah.
to look at a profession that we all love and to know that our opportunities seem to be diminishing.
Yeah.
I look at my friends, the people I work with, the Sports Illustrated, people like Peter Reed Miller and John McDonough, who got laid off a couple of days ago. And those are guys that I started off with, and we loved what we did, and we were fortunate in our timing to be the rock stars, or at least some of them in the photographic industry. There are others as well, certainly the wedding photographers. But what we do see, of course, is the wedding portrait people are particularly struggling to compete with moms with cameras, and the people go out there and load up a DVD with 1,000 images for $500 or whatever.
Yeah.
And you can look at the numbers and see that the photographers who seem to be doing best these days are largely the volume photographers. School photographers, however, are struggling because of the greed of school districts and whatever, asking for more and more of a rebate, typically 50% in some areas.
Right.
It's very hard to make a living. Participation rates used to be 83% on the high school level. Now there's 14% across the nation, and that's very low. So we're now distilled it down to people who do what I do, but most of them are struggling as well. And what I teach people when I try to speak with them is that other photographers, when I'm speaking to them, is if we are masters of our craft, or we're like chefs, as opposed to a line cook, if we're not just mass producing a product that you can make at home, we have a chance. So we have to truly understand light. We have to use composition and equipment and our vision and our workflow to do something that looks better than a parent can capture. We've got to do it more conveniently than a parent can capture themselves. We've got to have quality people on the front line so that when our customers come through, they feel good about the way we treated them. And then we have to have superior customer service. So all those things have to be working in tandem for us to have an opportunity, but we're all struggling. And so I think it forces us to redefine ourselves and to really be on the cutting edge, take advantage of technological developments when they fall in our lap.
Which we're going to talk about,
Yes, which is just got me invigorated all over again. But we just have to be the first to understand a new trend and jump on it, rather than whine about the fact that it's making it harder for us to compete. Because obviously, these pieces of equipment in the hands of amateurs can produce wonderful stuff. So we have to figure out how to make it wonderful and a little bit more. You know?
So for the folks that may not be familiar with the term volume photography, it kind of sounds daunting. Like volume, what is that? So can you first of all define what that is? What is the business of volume photography? And then the second part of the question is, actually just answer that first, and then we'll go into the second part.
Yeah, well, we used to be called sports photographers, but that is too wide a category because that could include people who work for sports also, or used to. So it includes action sports, sports for publication. We're doing sports not for publication, but to sell to the end user or the customer. And there's two types, basically. There's speculative action, where you go out and you photograph a soccer tournament, whatever, the hopes of selling to a parent. And that is very much hurting, except the people who do an exceptional job of it. Because, again, parents are tracking their own kid for a whole game, and they're bound to get a shot at their kid doing something. So what I do is what we call team and individual sports, or T&I sports. The basic model is to take a group photo of some sort and combine it with an individual shot of a kid. Possibly we call buddy pictures, one or more kids together, friends, siblings, and it can be, it's typically a sports model, but it can be a musical group, a choir with individual choir members. It can be a confirmation group at a church. It can be a Boy Scout or Girl Scout troop. So those are areas that are largely overlooked by our profession right now, because we're so focused on the sports. But if you divide that sports into two major subsets, it's scholastic sports, which would be middle schools and high schools typically, and then there's the other, which would be your youth sports, is what we call weekend, the weekend leagues, the soccer, baseball, football, basketball, and sometimes it happens in evenings. But so basically, it's two kinds of work, very similar, but different kind of marketing strategies.
So clearly, it sounds like a profitable business model.
It can be profitable, and it can be terrible. You have to get the participation rates up highly. Much of it is speculative in nature. You go in and you incur all the fixed expenses. You bring in the staff with the assumption that everybody's going to buy, and if they don't, we're at the mercy of a coach. If a coach doesn't pass out the order forms in advance, or he doesn't self-enthusiasm, if he just said, this guy used to shoot for SI, and instead says, hey, photo day's Friday, bring your uniforms, wash them. That's a whole different marketing approach. I'm at the mercy of whoever hands out those forms.
Right.
So it can be profitable, yes.
It
can be terrible.
So, okay. So looking at, the whole nature of the business is volume, right?
Yes.
Volume. So how do you overlay the volume aspect of the business with the artisanship of the business? Because people look at photography and your work, I've seen the work, and it's, beautiful shots of people, kids doing their thing. How do you do that repeatedly over and over and over again and still maintain the artisanship of your work while still creating enough volume to keep the lights on?
Well, I think that, of course, a big part of the challenge is understanding light. You're painting with light. Your goal is to create studio quality outside or inside in a range of environments where you don't have much control sometimes. You have to deal with ambient light and changing conditions. But if you're using a shoe mount strobe on automatic, that camera is not sophisticated enough to be able to look at lighting ratios and figure out how to get a beautiful color in a sunset, for example.
Yeah.
So part of it has to do with you just have to know what you're doing. Part of it's equipment. We're using monolights that recycle usually between 1 and 2 seconds. They're all off camera. I never have off-camera flash. I'm never tethered to a flash. I'm always working wirelessly.
Yeah.
So once I set up my lighting so that it can give me the kind of light I need, uniform within a tenth of a stop across a wide area, because I have to do big groups, small groups, and individuals. We'll shoot multiple 4 lines of individuals with one photographer. That's something that's
in one set.
Yeah, or maybe as many as 8. Because the way we do it is we try to leverage the ability or the skill set of the photographer by shooting multiple lines side by side as the kids are being posed. If a photographer is just shooting his own line and dealing with everything, taking money, they have to wait for the kid to pose and everything. But what I'm doing, or what Jamie, my photographer, is doing now, is she's going along and shooting this kid, and 10 seconds later shooting that kid, and then shooting that kid.
So someone's going by and moving down the line.
We have assistants moving up and down the line. We have someone taking money over here. We have someone taking order forms here and maybe handling 4 clipboards, writing down frame numbers. And then we have a single assistant moving back and forth as the photographer either sits and swivels and goes like this, or moves because we have to keep an element in the background in a fixed position relative to our subject, which doesn't give us the ability to sit in one place and get it all. We do a lot of green screen. So on green screen, we're working a 30-foot wide green screen, and we're able to sit in a single place and just go like this. I've shot as many as 8 lines before with one photographer. So the way we do the quality is to make sure that the lights are all metered out and giving the ratios we want. We have main, fill, background, and hair lights, just like in the studio. We use the same terminology. We go for 3-to-1 ratio sometimes we go for flat lighting. And then part of it is just having the expectations. You're going to grab a great image, take multiple pictures of each kid, have trained, very professional posers who know what they're looking for, quickly scanning up and down the body, looking for everything out of place, getting the angle right, getting the shoulders right, all of that, making sure the hair's out, just taking care. And
it sounds like you're breaking it down, so it sounds like there's the photographer who's in charge of capturing the image and the composition, the framing, and all that stuff, and I would assume the lighting as well, getting all that stuff nailed. And then you said you have assistants that are going down the line and taking care of the posing as well?
Yeah, like I once, when I was the photographer, did 39 soccer teams in 83 minutes.
In 83 minutes?
Yes, that's every individual in the 39 teams. And I had, I think, 3 people taking money. I had 4 people, each manning 2 clipboards, and I was shooting 8 lines. And we had one person called a wrestler. Their job is kind of like at Fry's Electronics, just to tell you what line to go to. And then they coordinate with the coaches when your team reaches critical mass, and then to count the number of people in that group, walk into position, know what the pattern is, because it's very systematic. 15 is going to be 4-5-6 or 6-5-4. You know, those types of things, and they'll line it up and stage it. So the photographer is on a radio headset, and I'm getting instructions saying, you know, we're 15 out on 3, meaning in 15 seconds on Studio 3, a team will be waiting for me. All I need to do is divert my attention from an individual here in roughly a period of time. I should have a team waiting for me with the board waiting to be slated. I take my 5 frames, give the frame number to that assistant, and I'm back working with the individuals. But it's all seamless and all the communication. Sometimes
it sounds choreographed almost.
It is, and we see it as performance art. When we got our game going and we're shooting 500 football players in an hour and a half on a national championship high school team, and we have the coaches all standing out there watching us and taking notes of what we're doing, we know we've done our job.
Yeah, it's got to be right. Wow, that's crazy. On average, you said like 5 shots per...
Well, our standard is we always take 2 pictures of each individual. Now with this new technology, we know if we have it in the first frame because we're chimping in the viewfinder. So that's kind of an old school way of doing it. Now we can cut that down. But typically, just 2 shots of each individual. If they're not looking too good, we might take 5 or 6 or 7. And the team, we're going to do 1 picture that shows a whiteboard, which tells us the team name and things like that, so we can track the image. And then we're taking typically 4 to 5. The bigger the group, the more we like to take, because you do head swaps. In a large group shot of 100 football players, we're swapping 5 or 6 heads for the final, results. So everyone's looking forward and eyes are open.
And I assume for those head swap shots, you're on a tripod, so things are locked down, or is it handheld?
Much of our work is on a monopod, but when we do the bigger shots, we are wanting to go to tripod whenever possible, because those shots may be blown up really large. And besides, there's a marketing aspect to everything we do. A tripod looks professional.
It does.
Whether we need it or not, now with the new FC1000, we're syncing at 2500th of a second. I don't need a monopod outside anymore. I'm shooting it at 2500th of a second.
You're freezing it.
And it just changes everything about the way we approach that. I have a small depth of field. I don't have to worry about distracting elements in the background. I'm recycling quickly. And I'll probably use a monopod, but it's so small and light, it just gets in the way. I think we'll just be hand-holding it from here on out.
Let's talk about these. So when you first started the business and you first got into this, what were you using gear-wise?
I was using speed graphics and flash. No, I'm not that old. No,
really?
No,
I was going to say. So you were Thor
I'm
with
58.
the
I'm not 78. No, Matthew Brady was my assistant. I first started on the Konica Auto Reflex T2, the world's first auto exposure camera. In 1971, got it from TM Chan in Hong Kong, so it came over with a brand blocked out in black.
Yeah.
Moved up to Nikon in 77. Was with a Nikon platform for many years. Jumped ship with virtually everybody SI in 87. Went over to Canon when they redid the mounts, and all of a sudden we had more room to put those contacts on there, and we could get the faster servo motors working for us. So I went to Canon then, and then anyone wants to buy some Canon gear, I've got a bunch of selling, but now we've been shooting exclusively with the Lumix product for this whole school year. So.
Really? And you're specifically the FZ1000,
FZ1000 and the GH4. We've got 4 of the GH4s. We've got 2 of these guys. We've only had these a couple weeks. They haven't been out very long.
Yeah.
And we haven't had the opportunity to take them outside much because right now in Texas it's cold and we're doing green screen inside almost the whole time. But with this is overkill. It's far more camera than I need because we're only going up to 16 by 20, but it's a beautiful camera. It's small and light, and I was extremely skeptical. It was clear that a mirrorless camera is going to be smaller, lighter, and cheaper. Okay, yeah. I had that. But I knew it was going to turn out substandard photos because the sensor is small.
Yeah.
So I got a loaner, and I set it up on my sticks, and I set up my 5D, and I put the nice glass on each, and did some test shots, and I was stunned that the color was much better on the cameras I started using here. I do not have to do color corrections and batch because they take everything into Photoshop afterwards. That's part of our workflow that most volume schools photography companies don't do. We crop and we do all kinds of custom things to trip it out. But the colors are beautiful, and then the sharpness. I couldn't believe that I was seeing detail I wasn't seeing with my Canon gear.
That's
so
amazing.
I then went on and studied how can that possibly be. Now I understand the science of it to some degree.
Yeah.
And there are reasons, and it makes sense. But initially, it was mind-blowing. I couldn't believe it.
See that, and that carries a lot of weight, considering your pedigree, and where you came from in photography and the business that you've built up to now the next step. I was going to say the end of the road, but the next step in your journey are these guys.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And they're just going to get better and better because they're a new camera. It's not a mature technology, and the DSLRs are on their way out, and they've been working on those for years. So we're very excited about it. I told the guys at Panasonic 3 weeks ago, he said, what do we need on these for the volume market? Because they didn't really realize that they had a product we wanted. You see, they designed the cameras to be video cameras that could do stills.
Yeah.
And so they're targeting people like Suzette Allen,
yeah.
who is an outstanding hybrid photographer who really is leveraging that ability to capture video.
Yeah.
I didn't care about video. Now I'm very interested, but I didn't care about it.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I just love it for what it does for stills.
Right.
Just, if that's all it does, I'm a happy camper.
Yeah.
And now that I see how easy it is, and now I can see I can do screen grabs and get 16 by 20s at the rate of 29 frames a second. It's like if you have a special needs kid, you just run some video and grab the kid.
That was my next question for you.
Yeah.
Because of that 4K and because of the speed and the choreographed workflow that you have you considered implementing 4K and doing frame grabs out of that?
Well, we already have. And the thing that I'm very excited about is many people aren't aware of this yet, but green screen technology is about to be kind of replaced by the double masking method where you fire off 2 sequences of flashes, a couple microsecond delay, and it's self-masking in the camera. And Nick Milas, a guy down in Australia, has come up with the technology and he's selling the product. And I've been talking with Nick about his needs. What he needs is a camera that can shoot 10 frames a second or faster, but only shoots off 2 images with 1 depression of the shutter release.
Right.
That's a firmware update that you can put on these cameras quite easily, and I think they're about to work on. That means that this camera, coupled with his system, will allow you to basically shoot what we call a green screen on a white background and get perfect registration, and it spits out a JPEG immediately that's already masked, so there is no post-production at all.
So what would be the final image out of there? Would it be like a PNG with a mask?
It'd be a PNG.
With a mask built in.
The mask is built in, the background is not dropped in yet, so that comes in post. You get to decide, and what most of the volume guys are doing now is they're offering their customers the ability to choose their background. So the PNG gets brought into a workflow where the consumer is going online, they're looking at 15 different backgrounds. They say, I want that background for one shot and this background for the other. The software is bringing the images together and displaying in the monitor so the consumer can make a buying decision, and then they're hitting the go button, and those images are now brought together, they're rasterized, and sent off to a lab, and the lab is outputting it.
Wow.
So that's a very exciting thing because I've just been very, very fortunate to finally be at the right place at the right time to be one of the first guys in my sector to get beyond my skepticism, which I'm very skeptical. I'm one of the hardest ones to convince, And once I did all the tests, and then I went to DxO Mark and read the actual test results, I said, oh my God. And so I didn't ramp up slowly like the last guy you interviewed. I got 4 of them and 9 lenses over a period of a week.
Wow.
And
so
said,
you jumped in with both feet.
I said, we can't waste another second. We got to get on this and get going with it and have some fun with it. And we have.
So what's next for the business? I mean, is it to grow and expand
well,
more and more?
For me personally, I used to joke we're a mom and pop without the mom, or that small. But we're now at the point where I have finally realized that I'm strongest teaching and not shooting. So I have taught Jamie over here, and she's done an outstanding job. She's taken over in photography. Now together we're going to go out and we're going to hire and train some people, and we're going to grow this way. And we're going to become a company that focuses on educating photographers and educating posers and number writers and all that.
Excellent.
And the whole time with the focus of trying to bring in as many people as possible and give them the most positive work environment where they're compensated very, very well, especially relative to their industry. We all love each other, get along great, and along the way we're creating some nice memories for our customers.
Love it.
That's the vision.
Dave Stock, what's the URL where people can go to check out what you're working on or hire you?
www.teamdsp.com. It's TEAMDSP, which is Dave Stock Photography on our good days and Dumb Stupid People on our bad days.com.
Yep.
And
that's it. That's awesome. Congratulations on all your successes. And,
thank you very much.
And good luck with where you're going with all this stuff. It's it seems like a convergence of a profitable business model with tools to make it even easier.
It just makes it easier to do the job that we're doing, especially when you're training photographers, because they're looking at eyepiece, they're getting instant confirmation of the image, and so the learning curve is very, very steep because we don't have to go back to the office later. Say, remember when you did that? They're seeing it right there. They know if they have it or not, and that in itself is a huge game changer.
I love it. Mr. Stock, thank you very much. Pleasure talking with you. I'm Frederick Van Johnson. That's the end of this session. This is the Lumix Lounge. You can check it out at lumixlounge.com. We'll see you in the next session.